Today we're going to talk about one of the greatest what-ifs in the history of Westeros, and a man whose presence carried the most natural aura of kingship the realm has ever seen, Lord Baelor Targaryen. And don't worry, this video will contain no spoilers about the future of the story or the series.
These men mean to see you dead. They will fight savagely.
As will we, my lord. What of the King's Guard?
I will handle the King's Guard. Their oath forbids them to harm a Prince of the Blood.
Is that honorable, your grace?
The gods will let us know. Be vigilant. Don't die.
In the history of Westeros, kings usually die because of their hunger for power. But Baelor died because he chose honor and justice. He's one of the characters I love discussing the most, yet he's also a name that always leaves me with a strange sense of sadness, a quiet bitterness, almost like mourning a lost possibility. So let's take a closer look at Baelor Breakspear. He was the eldest son of King Daeron II, the first heir to the throne, and the Prince of Dragonstone. His mother was a Martell, which placed him right at the center of the political tensions surrounding the conquest and integration of Dorne. With his dark hair and dark eyes inherited from his Dornish mother, Baelor looked different from most Targaryens. Yet despite that, or perhaps because of it, he became one of the most respected figures in the entire history of this world. He didn't ride a terrifying dragon that people feared, but he had something else, an extraordinary charisma. The way he used power, his deep sense of justice, and his unwavering stance against injustice placed him in a completely different league. Normally, possessing even one of these qualities would be enough for a king to stand out. Baelor, however, seemed to carry the virtues of several great kings within a single man. Baelor was also an exceptional warrior and strategist. During his conversation with Dunk, he even remembers how a relatively unknown knight like Sir Arlen of Pennytree fought, which shows how closely he studied the abilities of warriors across the realm. He earned his famous nickname Breakspear at the age of just 17, after defeating his uncle Daemon Blackfyre in a tourney. But this was no ordinary tournament. It was the grand tournament held to celebrate the marriage of Princess Daenerys Targaryen and Meryn Martell. Why is that important? Because one of the main reasons Daemon Blackfyre would later rebel was his love for Daenerys, and the fact that King Daeron married her off for political reasons. In other words, during this tournament, the woman Daemon loved was being married to another man. Daemon had every possible reason to prove himself that day. Yet standing in front of him was a 17-year-old boy, Baelor. And Baelor defeated him. Of course, this would not be the last time these two faced each other. Years later, they would meet again on the battlefield during the Battle of the Redgrass Field. Although the decisive move of the battle came from Bloodraven, Baelor and his brother Maekar played a critical role in ending the war. In fact, after the battle, a famous song emerged that symbolized them both, the hammer and the anvil. A song many fans will recognize from Game of Thrones. Baelor was the hammer, Maekar was the anvil. And this is where the irony begins. The hammer that crushed enemies on the battlefield. Baelor himself would years later be crushed by accident in a tournament, struck in the head by the mace of his own brother Maekar, the very anvil of that old song. Even before becoming king, Baelor was one of the rare figures to receive the title Protector of the Realm. This title was personally granted to him by his father, King Daeron II. That alone shows the immense potential people saw in him. But perhaps the hardest challenge for someone with such power is maintaining the balance between mercy and justice. Baelor proved he could. After the Blackfyre Rebellion, his conciliatory attitude toward the rebels showed remarkable restraint. And during the tournament, when he recognized Sir Arlen's shield and defended Dunk, he once again showed his sense of fairness. When Dunk faced the accusation involving Prince Aerion, Baelor advised him to demand a trial of 7, a dangerous but honorable path. More importantly, Baelor himself chose to stand beside Dunk. If Dunk failed to find 6 champions to fight with him, he would automatically be declared guilty. At the most critical moment, Baelor appeared in full armor. He stood against 3 Kingsguard, and even against his own brother Maekar, knowing that the Kingsguard would hesitate to harm him. Among all the Targaryens who never became king, Baelor is almost always considered the greatest loss. Fans often compare him to Rhaegar Targaryen. Both were beloved princes, intelligent men, and figures connected to prophecy. But Baelor is usually considered superior. Why? Because while Rhaegar, driven by prophecy and the Lyanna affair, helped plunge the realm into war, Baelor risked his life and the stability of his dynasty for the honor of a nameless knight. Rhaegar acted like a tragic romantic. Baelor acted like a true knight. Some theories suggest that Baelor's death was not entirely accidental. According to certain interpretations, Bloodraven, or even the gods themselves, may have shaped the outcome. King Daeron's prophetic dreams may not have been simple visions of fate, but rather part of a greater design. Some fans believe Bloodraven allowed Baelor's death, or guided events through dreams, in order to strengthen the future bond between Dunk and Egg, which could become vital in facing the coming threat of the White Walkers. Another interpretation, one that I personally find convincing, is that Baelor's decision to join Dunk's Trial of Seven was not simply an act of kindness. Baelor also understood the growing resentment among the people toward the Targaryen dynasty, especially because of the cruelty of Prince Aerion. If Dunk had been executed unjustly, it could have sparked unrest. By personally stepping in to defend Dunk, Baelor achieved two things at once. He ensured justice, and he restored the image of the Targaryens as protectors of the realm. In other words, it was a dangerous but brilliant political move. Baelor's story is almost like a Greek tragedy. A noble hero, a small twist of fate, and a devastating end. He may not have looked like a typical Targaryen, but he represented something the realm desperately needed after the Age of Dragons: balance, rationality, and stability. Had he become king, everything might have been different. Baelor's death is not just the loss of a character. It is the mourning of a possibility. The human mind is strange. We often see unrealized possibilities as greater than the realities that actually happened. Perhaps Baelor is the perfect victim of the dilemma described in Milan Kundera's The Unbearable Lightness of Being. The passage essentially says this: we can never truly know whether a decision was right or wrong, because we have no second life to compare it with. Everything happens only once. We live our lives without rehearsal, like an actor walking onto a stage without ever practicing the role. And if the first rehearsal of life is life itself, what value can that life truly have? Neither the people of Westeros nor we as viewers ever saw a world where Baelor became king. And perhaps the reason we imagine him as the perfect king is precisely because he never lived long enough to make mistakes. Every unrealized possibility is destined to remain perfect. As Soren Kierkegaard once said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Baelor looked forward and chose knightly honor. His life ended in that moment. We, however, look backward and imagine how his kingship might have saved the realm. His story is actually a reflection of the small choices we make every day. Choices that silently kill thousands of other possible futures. When we choose one path, we destroy countless others. Baelor chose Dunk, and with that choice, he may also have destroyed the possibility of a peaceful reign. Yet without giving spoilers, that terrible outcome may have also led to events that benefited Westeros in other ways. Perhaps true virtue lies in having the courage to choose what is right without knowing what the outcome will be. In the end, Baelor Breakspear leaves us with one of George R.R. Martin's favorite bitter truths. The world is not a place where the good always win, but the actions of the best among us are what still make that world meaningful.